Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's video on how I would write Lost. This is part 4, which covers season 4. So this video is a part of a series of videos where I say how I would do a reboot of Lost if I was writing a reboot of Lost, and how I would like to see a reboot of Lost done. Now this is part 4, so if you haven't seen the first 3 parts, I would recommend you go watch those first before watching this part, because I'm going to continue off of the changes I had already made for the first 3 seasons, and these changes sort of balloon where I'm starting out season 4 in a very different place than the actual season 4 starts. Also, I'll give a spoiler warning for the entire series of Lost. If you haven't seen Lost up to the end of season 6, you won't want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. Gotta jump straight into this season 4, but I want to really quickly say that season 4 is different. How I would write season 4 is going to be different from the first 3 seasons, because this is where I really start to diverge from the show. This is when the butterfly effect, the changes I made in earlier seasons, start to really come into effect, and this is where I really start to take the show in a different direction. Because for the most part, especially the first 2 seasons, somewhat the third, I was just keeping things pretty much the same as the show, except condensing the episodes, where here I have pretty much the same number of episodes as season 4, but I'm starting to go in an entirely different direction than the show did. Well, not entirely, but by the time I get to season 6, it's going to look almost nothing like the actual season 6 that aired in Lost, because you know how much I don't like that. So this is where I'm starting to go off in that direction too, because I know, unlike the writers, I know where I want to end up. So I'm starting to plan for that and go in that direction. Anyway, as I would normally do, let me start this video off with the casting list of the characters I have in season 4, just to remind you and whatnot. So I'm gonna list these characters. Usually I split them up for main characters, supporting characters, extras, but instead for season 4, since season 4 is actually split up, most of season 4 is split up into 3 camps: Team Jack, Team Locke, and Team Freighter, which is true for my version as well. So I'm gonna list the characters off in that order. So let's start with Team Jack. We have Jack, Kate, Juliet, Sun, Jen, Daniel Faraday, Charlotte, Steve, Tracy, Shannon. And then we have 10 extras, or side background characters who, as I said, have been consistent the whole time, but they don't really have any speaking lines. They're just there to be consistent in the scenery. I'll go ahead and name them. I usually don't, but why not? So we got Susan, Jonathan, Jasper, Esmeralda, Matthew, Carlos, Kelly, Jennifer, Bob, and Trevor. Cool. So then we go over to Team Locke. For Team Locke, I'm going to have Locke, Sawyer, Ben, Mr. Echo, Hurley, Claire, Miles, Rose, Bernard, Libby, Fergert, Alex, and Rousseau. In terms of extras, we have Richard, Lucy, and Paul. So a lot less extras. We only have 3 extras with Team Locke. We have 10 extras with Team Jack. That means we have a total of 20 people with Team Jack and 16 people with Team Locke. So Team Locke is a bit smaller in terms of that, which is kind of what I wanted to do. Which you'll see why later on. Of course, the main difference between my version and show's version of this split up is Rose and Bernard go with Team Locke and not Team Jack, which I think, as I talked about earlier, makes a fuck ton more sense, because Rose clearly does not want to leave the island, and they just wanted her to be with Team Jack because they wanted to kill off everyone in Team Locke. But I'm not killing off everyone in Team Locke, so I think it makes a lot more sense for her to go with Locke, and plus she has this connection with Locke. Her saying, "Oh, he's a killer," I didn't buy that. That's just a ridiculous excuse. Anyway, Team Freighter is pretty much the same as the show. Saeed, Desmond, Michael, Lapidus, Minkowski, the captain, the doctor, Kimi, Omar. Same as the show. Okay, so let me now jump straight into my episodes of season 4. Let's start with episode 1, the beginning of the end, which is a Hurley flash forward. So Hurley's flash forwards are the same as they were in the show, except Hurley never tells Jack the island wants them but to come back, because that's really inconsistent with what happens later on. So he just doesn't say that in my version. So the island storyline plays pretty similar, except Mr. Echo and Libby are with Desmond, Steve, Saeed, Sawyer, and Juliet on the beach at the start of the episode. Because remember, Through the Looking Glass, people were a bit different there. So Libby tries to comfort Hurley after losing Charlie. Hurley never gets separated from the group and never sees a magically appearing cabin. So the whole magically appearing cabin element is gone in my version. I thought that was silly, so I'm leaving that out. Which will balloon into changes later, but I'll get to that later. So Naomi never comes back to life. Like, she's always dead. You know that how in the show she was like, oh, tell her sister I love her, or has these dummy trails. When really we saw her killed at the end of season 3, so my version, she's dead. So instead we see Kate and Jack trying to bluff their way with Minkowski, who doesn't say it, but can tell that Naomi's dead. So the camp splits up. At the end, some people go with Locke, some people staying with Jack, just as I described. And my notes just there, and then the episode ends with Daniel Faraday parachuting in and saying, "Are you Jack?" Just like the actual episode, and that's how my episode ends. Cool. So, we'll get into my episode 2, which is Confirmed Dead, which is a freighter folk flashback. So, Miles, Charlotte, Faraday, and Lapidus, just like the actual episode. So this episode stays pretty much exactly the same, except Miles' powers are shown to be more consistent with how they're described later on, that he doesn't talk to the dead, but he hears their thoughts, because the actual episode is a bit inconsistent with that. Lapidus never says that he was supposed to fly 815. I thought that was ridiculous and never actually came into play, so it was kind of unnecessary, so I'm getting rid of that from my version. In my version, he's just a conspiracy theorist that believes the 815 flight was fake. Now, important part. The plane is not found near Indonesia, as it is in the show, which is in the complete opposite direction that the plane was flying from. It's like ridiculously, not just slightly opposite. It's like the complete and totally opposite direction. So it makes no sense. So I talked about this in my actual review of season 4, that the conspiracy theory was that the plane was actually right, that it was actually 815. The natural assumption people would make is that there's no way that could be 815 because it's in the total wrong direction. So in my version, it's going to make more sense. The plane is going to be discovered in the Tonga Trench, which is the second deepest trench in the world. Yes, I did Google this, and is much, 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 much closer to the flight. It's not directly, but it's way closer. It's at least in the general vicinity of the flight path between Sydney and LA. So it will make a fuck ton more sense. More people will be able to buy it. And I'll get into the changes this makes later on. But the rest of this episode, Confirmed Dead, all goes the same as the actual show. Locke getting Charlotte and Miles pulling a gun on Jack. All that stays the same. Anyway, we'll get to my episode 3, which is The Economist, a Saeed flash forward. So this is pretty simple because I'm keeping this episode exactly the same. I'm not actually changing anything about this episode except for when Hurley fools Saeed and makes him think he's that Locke put him in the locked him in the closet, but really he's just fooling him. Libby's gonna be there too because since she's alive, it would Saeed wouldn't really buy it if Hurley left Libby, but if they're together, he'd buy it. But other than that, it's not that I think this episode is great. It's just that there's no need to change it for my version. Everything in it fits well. Seeing Saeed in the future with, being an assassin, killing the guy on the golf course, and then finding out he's working for Ben at the end of the episode. And then Saeed, going to do the trade with Miles and trading Miles for Charlotte. And then him and Desmond getting on the helicopter. All that's the same. Cool. So, we'll move over to my episode 4, which is Eggtown, a Kate flash forward. So the flash forwards are exactly the same. You got Kate's trial, you got the big reveal that her son is actually Aaron, all that, the same. Not changing any of that. The island storyline is similar, where it leads you to believe that Kate is pregnant with Sawyer's child, and the reveal comes later in the flash forward where we reveal Kate's son is actually Aaron. And the storyline with Kate wanting to talk to Miles to find out if they know about her, and using, Miles uses her in order to talk to Ben to try to blackmail him for $1.2 million. However, in my version, Sawyer doesn't live with Hurley, as Hurley and Libby live together. Sawyer lives with Mr. Echo, and there are some jokes about Sawyer trying to joke around with him and be all sarcastic, but he just stares intently whenever he does this, so he's like the straight man to Sawyer. However, there's a side story of Libby and Hurley being sick and vomiting, and when Ben is told this, you see him have this smug look on his face. And the reveal in the flash forward of Aaron being Kate's son doesn't come at the end of the episode like it does in the actual episode. It happens before Kate takes Miles to see Ben. And when Kate is with Ben, Ben tells her that she isn't pregnant, rather than Kate telling this to Sawyer earlier, as in the actual episode. So at this stage, Kate still thinks she may be pregnant, and Ben tells her that she isn't. So he explains that Juliet tested all the women in the camp and sent the results to him, so Juliet doesn't even know, but he does, and he knows that some of the women at the camp are pregnant, and she's not one of them, because this was a dangling thread that the show never covered, because it implied that the others were coming to the camp to get pregnant women, but it never said who these pregnant women, and they just dropped that storyline. I'm keeping up with it. So Kate asks, well, who is pregnant? And Ben says there's 3 women that are pregnant. 2 of them are back with Jack, and one of the 2 that are back with Jack, of course, is son. We all know this. But the other one, the 3rd pregnant woman, is here with Locke. So Kate asks who they are, but then we jump cut to Libby throwing up. Ha ha ha. While Hurley is actually feeling better, and Kate then knocks on the door and asks to speak to Libby alone, and when she does, Kate reveals to her that she's pregnant, and that's why she's been sick. Then she was like, well, why is Hurley sick as well? And Kate is like, I don't know, just a coincidence, I guess, sympathy pains, who knows. But the mystery of who the 3rd woman who's pregnant, who is still back with Jack, is not answered in this episode. So then, just as the actual episode goes, Locke kicks Kate out, and she returns to Jack's camp. Cool, so then we'll get into my episode 5, which is The Constant, a Desmond time travel episode. Pretty much exactly the same as it aired, because this episode is near perfect. It is so awesome. The whole thing with him time traveling, getting unstuck in time, his 1996 self comes into the future, and he just keeps going back and forth, and they arrive at the freighter, and Minkowski is dying. All that's the same. The little that I am changing is when Desmond calls Penny at the end of the episode. She's not at home in London, but she's actually on a boat on the Pacific looking for him, because I want to stay consistent with the big season 2 reveal that she knows about the island, she knows about the electromagnetic event. The other guy's like, we found him, so she's out looking for him in my version. He's confused because he called a London number, but she explains that she remembered what he had told her 8 years ago, so had her calls from home forwarded to her out at sea. She will then imply that she knew Desmond was on the island, and she was tracking the electromagnetic event, and she was out in the Pacific at the coordinates she had, but she couldn't find the island. This may seem confusing at first, but it is setting up for the fact that the island is constantly moving, which will be explained in Season 5. So, it will retroactively be implied that when Desmond turned the failsafe key, the island moved, so it was no longer the coordinates that she had, but Whitmore had used the lamppost station in LA to find where the island was currently at, but Penny didn't know about that, and I'll get more into that later. Now, how Penny knew about the island and took to look for the electromagnetic event won't be explained here, but I'll get into that in a future season. And I won't just abandon the whole storyline like the show did, which really pissed me off. But the rest of the phone call is the same, that ends with them both saying, I love you, and then they lose a connection, and Desmond is okay now as his time travel has stopped. Cool. So, we move over to the next episode, which is episode 6. Meet Kevin Johnson. So I'm pushing this episode forward a bit, mainly because I want Michael to be in the season a bit earlier. So anyway, this is a Michael flashback. So the episode begins with Saeed and Desmond being taken to the captain, and they had the same conversation that did in the show where the captain claims that Ben Linus faked the plane crash, but then the doctor takes them to the quarters, and they meet Kevin Johnson, who Saeed immediately recognizes as Michael, and then that's the teaser. We get the whole lost, lost thing come up. After we get back from the teaser, we go to Locke's camp, where Ben tries to convince Locke to set him free, but Locke says that he doesn't trust him, so Ben shows him the tape of Charles Woodmore and reveals that Michael is his man on the boat, and we don't have to be coy about this like the show was, because we already know it's Michael. We then go back to the boat where Saeed confronts Michael, like slams him against the wall and forces him to tell his backstory. So then we get the Michael flashbacks, which are pretty much exactly the same as they were in the show, where he keeps trying to commit suicide and he fails, although when he's in the hospital he has a vision and he has that dream and he sees a woman he killed. He sees Ana Lucia, because in my version Ana Lucia was the only person he killed. He didn't kill Libby, who's still alive. So he tries to talk to Walt, who's living with his mother, whom we don't see. We don't see Walt because we have the same age issues that the actual show did. So Tom will appear to Michael and be the one to tell him to go to the boat, but it will actually make sense in my version, as in my version, no one ever said in season 3 that people can't leave and come back to the island. That never happened in my version. It's still implied that people can come and go from the island as they please. And so it will be implied here that Tom simply took the sub to the mainland to find Michael. So continuity solved. As in my version, there's a 5-episode gap in season 3 where we don't see Tom from the time of Ben's surgery to when Locke destroys the submarine, also making it clear Tom returned to the island before Locke destroyed the submarine. So in universe, that's about 2 months that had passed, which gives Tom plenty of time to leave the island and come back. Now you may be thinking, oh, it takes a lot longer for a submarine to go from the South Pacific to the United States, but maybe they didn't do that. Maybe he just took the sub to Fiji, a nearby island or something, and then flew to the United States. So plenty of time to come and go. But the rest is the same, as it ends with Saeed taking Michael to the captain and turning him in as a saboteur. But the Orn Island scene at the end of the episode, however, is different. We don't see Rousseau die in my version. Instead, we get the ending that was the ending of the actual The Other Woman, where Locke lets Ben out, who casually says, oh, see you at dinner to Sawyer and Hurley, who are a bit upset. That's how this episode ends. Cool, so then we get into my episode 7, which is Jian. Sorry for pronouncing it wrong. Sun Jin's child. So this is a Sun flash forward. So first of all, Sun's flash forwards are the same, exactly the same. Not changing that at all. But there are no Jin flashbacks. No BS with a panda bear meant to throw you off. Sun's flash forward will still imply that Jin is alive and coming to the pregnancy, or the birthing. But you don't see Jin on his way, and the viewer will still assume that it's just because this is a Sun-centric episode and we don't see Jin's perspective because we're only getting Sun's perspective. So I am definitely taking out that cheap, contrived, disgusting BS fake out and turning it into a more plausible one. And if you say, well, then it will be more predictable, people will be able to tell that Jin's dead because we don't see him, fine. I don't care. As long as it's not bullshit. Anyway, the ending will still be the same, with Hurley visiting Sun in Korea and the big reveal that Jin is dead and Sun crying at his grave. And the island storyline is pretty much the same, at least as far as Camp Jack goes. With Sun wanting to go to Locke's camp, and Juliet telling Jin of Sun's infidelity in order to stop her. Except Jin goes fishing with Steve, because in my version Bernard is at Camp Locke. And on the fishing, while they're fishing, Steve talks about how jealous he is of Jin, who's going to be a father, because he always wanted to be a father. Foreshadow, foreshadow. Because at the end of the episode, we see Jack go to examine Tracy and reveals to her and Steve that she's pregnant, because Kate had returned from Locke's camp and had told Jack who the other pregnant woman was, and it was, in fact, Tracy. And then Sun and Jin, they make up and they swear to never leave each other. And then the flash forward reveals that Jin's actually dead. Sad, sad. So as for the other storyline in this episode, it's Locke's camp, not the freighter, because we already moved on past the stuff with Sayid talking to the captain. In Locke's camp, you see Ben explain to the group, and I mean everyone, not just the main characters. I mean everyone who's at Locke's camp, which makes more sense. It's all 16 people. That Widmore owns the boat. Well, maybe 15 because Miles not there. But anyway, Ben explains to them that Widmore owns the boat and is coming to abduct Ben, and that he plans to kill everyone on the island once they have Ben, which is partially true, but they don't know that at this stage. After this little meeting, Libby then goes to Ben and asks him about how pregnant women on the island die, and Ben says that yes, they do, and that her best bet is to go to his people so that they can help her. She asks how can they help her, because they couldn't help anyone else, and wouldn't going to Juliet be better because she's actually a maternity doctor. But then Ben says that she doesn't have any equipment. She doesn't have the equipment that they need. His people do. So Ben says that he can, that if she goes to his people, they can help her. So she agrees to do that. And when Ben asks if Hurley knows, she says no, he can't know. So later, Ben tells Rousseau and Alex to take Libby to the temple to join its people, and says that they'll be much safer there. So the three of them, Libby, Rousseau, and Alex, leave. And that is the end of my episode 7. So then we get into my episode 8, which is The Others 97 Days. Now this is where I'm going complete total direction than the show did. Instead of having that really crappy episode, The Other Woman, I'm going to have an episode called The Others 97 Days, which is a full Others flashback episode in the same vein as the other 48 Days. How that starts at day 1 with the 8:15 crash, but it shows you the perspective of the tail section survivors, where this episode will start at day 1, crash of 8:15, but it will show you the perspective of the others. Hence the title, isn't it clever? Anyway, so in this episode, it begins with the scene from season 3 that shows Ben and the others watching 8:15 crash, where he tells Ethan and Goodwin to go, to the plane crash. It then jumps quickly to him visiting Mikhail and the flame with Juliet, where Mikhail tells Ben about how many people are on the plane, and he's finding out exactly who they are, which we had this scene in the episode One of Us, but in my version it was in the episode Not in Portland, but whatever. So then we jump later when Ben returns from the flame, where Tom comes to him and gives him lists and says that Ethan and Goodwin got back to them with lists of everyone who survived the plane crash. Ben starts walking off. When Tom asks where he's going, he says that he needs to ask Jacob what to do. So then we see Ben walking off on his own, but he's not going to Jacob. He goes to an abandoned Dharma station, maybe the Arrow, I don't know. And he takes the information Mikhail had printed out for him with all the files and information of the passengers of flight of 8:15 and cross-references that with Ethan and Goodwin's list, and he writes out his own list. So here we got definitive proof that Ben made up the list, not Jacob. He was lying to everyone when he says they were Jacob's list. So on the fuselage section list, we see names like Locke, Jack, Claire, Sun, Rose, Steve, Joanna, and Art, but you can't make out the rest of the list. And on the tail section list, you see names like Echo and Lars, but you can't make out the rest of the list. Ben then returns to Othersville and gives orders to two people, Price, and then some guy we've never met. So Ben gives the tail section list to Price and tells him to go out there and get these people. He then gives the fuselage section list to No Name and tells him to go and get those people. So then we follow No Name as he leads a group of people towards the fuselage section. Halfway there, though, they get attacked by the smoke monster and they're killed. And then we see the scene from the pilot episode where Jack and all of them are watching the smoke monster shaking the trees in the distance. And then we see close up the smoke monsters actually killing the men that Ben sent to the fuselage section. So this ties everything together. It explains why the tail section was terrorized by the others and not the fuselage selection, and also ties it back into why they saw the monster shaking the trees. Nice, it ties up everything. Later, we see Price returns with a bunch of people from the tail section, and they only kidnap 4 people. So Ben asks where the rest of them are, but Price explains that they had to retreat because Mr. Echo killed 2 of their men. Ben doesn't seem to care about 2 of his people dying, and he just yells at Price to get the rest. Price is pissed off and says that he won't risk trying to get Mr. Echo again. So Ben says, fine, forget about Echo, but get the rest of them. Price says that he needs a few days to train and regroup, and Ben agrees. So Tom comes running to Ben and tells him that all the men they sent to the fuselage section have been killed. Ben's eyes get big and he freaks out and he runs inside his house. We see him go to this hidden room in his house and he pulls that little plug where the water drains. Later we see the Man in Black. Yep. That is right, the Man in Black. I'm introducing him in season 4. He shows up at Ben's house and he says, "What do you want?" Ben asks why he killed his men, because they had a deal, so it would imply, yes, that the Man in Black is in fact the smoke monster. I am getting that right out of the way in season 4. So, the Man in Black tells Ben that the survivors in the fuselage selection are off limits to him. When he asks why, the Man in Black says, "I don't want Jacob to get a hold of them." Ben complains that Jacob actually isn't here, but the Man in Black says that all of your people think that Jacob is here, and they think he's the one that they're following, so no, it's too risky. Ben again says that they have a deal, but the Man in Black counters that their deal is for him, as for the Man in Black to keep Ben safe, not do his bidding. And then he tells him not to summon him again unless his life is in danger, and then he leaves. Foreshadow. So, a lot of what's going on here won't be explained until future seasons, but yes, I am setting up for a foreshadowing a lot of things here. So we then follow the others, some more, touching on some of the events that happened in the show, such as getting the scene from the webisodes of Walt killing the birds and Juliet insisting that they give Walt back and Ben refusing. Of course, we don't see Walt because, again, we have the same age problem that the show had, but it would be like that webisode. But Ben will keep saying that Jacob wants him here, but as we know in this episode, it isn't Jacob at all. It's Ben who's making up the lists. He will also tell, so later on in the scene, we'll jump a couple weeks later, he'll tell Juliet that they need to get Shepard so they can perform the surgery on him because he still has that tumor he needs to get rid of. And Juliet will ask, well, why can't they just go get Jack? And Ben will say that Jacob won't let him, even though we know Jacob isn't the one stopping him as the Man in Black. So Juliet suggests that they lure Jack out. And Ben will ask, well, how? And she'll mention Michael and tell him it means he'll have to give up Walt, though, and ask which one is more important, keeping Walt or surviving. So Ben tells her to go ahead and do it. So again, this is more consistent with, because in the show we got the scene expose where Ben tells Juliet, "Oh, we're gonna get Jack out and we're gonna use Michael." But if they were planning on using Michael all along, then why did they simply, when he was out with the tail section, why did they simply let him go and not take him there? Why, when they saw him on the raft, why didn't they just take him there? So I'm saying that they came up with this later, and it actually makes sense because why he was so insistent he wouldn't give up Walt. Why did he give up Walt later? But Juliet lays it out for him. Well, you have to decide. Are you going to give up Walt or are you going to die? And he's like, okay, fine, I'll give up Walt. And so it makes much more sense. So anyway, we also get some scenes of Ben and Alex together where she questions him about how she's treating the A-15 survivors and the relationship is falling apart. But he expresses that he still loves her a lot. Later, we see Ben go out to Jacob's cabin, and he kicks the circle of ash so that it's broken, and he throws some salt along the porch and the front door. After he does this, the man in black appears to him and thanks him, but Ben just says, "Remember our deal." Then on his way back from the cabin, he's caught in Rousseau's trap, where he's just like, ah, shit. He found a loophole, thinking that the man in black betrayed him. We then get a montage that quickly goes through Ben being held captive by Jack and Locke in the hatch, Ben seeing the timer go off and pushing the button, but lying to Locke, telling him that he didn't push the button, tying up some loose ends. Then Michael freeing Ben, and then it ends with Ben telling Michael, "We're the good guys," after he lets Michael go, and then the electromagnetic event happens. So we're then back in Dharmaville, where we see Ben in his house talking to Richard Alpert, and who asks how he got out of there. And Ben explains that he took the identity of Henry Gale, and Richard is like, "What, you mean that poor soul who crashed in a balloon whom you had killed?" And Ben's like, "Yeah, that one." Richard says that they have more pressing matters, though, that Widmore got a hold of one of their men, whom he called by name. And then Richard plays him the tape of Widmore beating up his man. Ben then asks Richard if Widmore got anything from him, and Richard says, well, yeah, that he found out the location of the lamppost. So Ben's eyes get big and is like, then it's only a matter of time before Widmore finds the island, which means he'll be sending people here. Richard then asks, well, why not just come himself? Why doesn't Widmore just come himself? But Ben says that isn't his style. Why take the risk when you can just pay others to do it for you? Ben says that they'll need to prepare, but first he needs to take care of the surgery. Richard then asks, well, why doesn't he just go off island to get the surgery taken care of? But Ben says that Jacob won't let him. But what he really means is that the man in black won't let him. But that doesn't sound right to Richard, but he just lets this go. Later, we see Ben shortly after he recovered from his surgery, and he goes to Tom and he tells him that he has a mission for him. That Widmore is sending a boat here, and that he wants him to go to the mainland and convince Michael to be his spy. Tom says it's a tall order, but Ben gives him the file on the fake 815 and says that Widmore planned a fake that will be uncovered to the public soon, and I'm sure that will be enough to convince Michael. We then scan through the time that Locke was with the others, blowing up the submarine and all that, and Ben watching with jealousy as all the others admire Locke, and then Ben humiliates him with his father, and then they all leave Locke behind. We then see Ben in his tent communicating with Michael and getting names of all the men on Widmore's boat. After the call, he tells Richard that Widmore is sending a couple of scientists to the island. He has no idea why, but they think they're coming to study the island, but clearly they're not. And he's talking about Charlotte and Faraday. He then also says coming with them will be Miles, who has a special ability and Naomi, a trained retriever, and their job is clearly to abduct him. Richard asks what happens if they fail, and Ben answers, in that case, they have a fail-safe in form of a mercenary group led by Martin Christopher Keamy, and their job will be to just kill everyone in their way and abduct him. But either way, they're going to kill everyone on the island once they have him. Has Widmore wants revenge, and he'll take it out on everyone. So after Richard leaves, the man in black appears to Ben and says what he did to Locke wasn't enough, that Locke will be back. But Ben says, well, if he comes back, I'll just have to kill him. And the man in black laughs and asks if he really thinks the island will let him. Ben says that either way, I can't let him out of my sight. We then get a scene of Richard Alpert arriving at the temple and approaching Dogun. Yes, I am actually throwing in Dogun early in season 4 as well. So Dogun then complains that Richard shouldn't be listening to Ben, and that Ben has no business being the leader. But Alpert argues that Jacob doesn't want him to interfere, but Dogun doesn't seem to agree. We then get a montage of the first half of season 4 that focuses specifically on Ben watching Locke with jealousy, and Ben telling other people there that he's exactly where he needs to be, implying Ben is staying with Locke to keep an eye on him because killing him outright didn't work. It then ends with Ben sending Rousseau, Alex, and Libby to the temple. We then cut to new footage of Alex, Rousseau, and Libby talking and walking in the forest when suddenly people start shooting at them. Rousseau gets her gun and starts shooting back while the three of them hide behind a tree, but they flank her and they kill Rousseau. Both Libby and Alex throw their hands up and surrender, and Keamy and the mercenaries surround them in the circle with their weapons raised, and the episode ends. Dun, dun, dun. So, you may think that's quite bold having in this episode. That is maybe it's looking back too much at the previous seasons instead of addressing new issues. But then, at the same time, some might complain that I am throwing in all these elements from like season 6 earlier, like too early. But here's how I look at it. To me, this would be the perfect episode to tie the whole show together. Because one of my main problems with season 4 was that I didn't feel connected to the first 3 seasons. Because in the first 3 seasons, we got tons of episodes like the other 48 days and other episodes in season 3, or the one with maternity leave that explained what happened to Claire when she was abducted. We got tons of episodes in the first 3 seasons that tied events from earlier seasons together and explained perspectives we didn't see, and I think we lost that. That's one of the things I think we lost in later seasons. So I think we needed to see an episode like this, because what we actually got in season 4 was The Other Woman, which was a shit episode. It tried to do some of the backstory of what we didn't see, but it didn't add up. It didn't make sense. It didn't add anything to the story. It was just dumb. So I'm throwing something in that it ties up a lot of loose ends. It explains the perspective of Ben, but I would argue that it's not just nostalgic, that it does have relevance to this. Maybe not everything does, but for the most part, the episode has relevance of what is to come because it sets up Ben's storyline of why he's there with Team Locke, because this is something that wasn't made clear in the actual show that really irritated me, because Ben kept saying, I'm exactly where I need to be, and others would be like, oh, Ben's exactly where he wants to be. Why? Why does he want to be there? Because the writers want him to be a main cast member on the show. That seemed to be the only explanation. Or so I make a clear explanation of why he wants to be there. And yes, I do kind of telegraph maybe too much that the scene where Ben calls the smoke monster, but at least it makes sense. Whereas I think in the actual show, Ben calling the smoke monster to kill the mercenaries doesn't actually add up to what we see later on, because the showrunners didn't really know what they're doing. Where even though it's a bit telegraphed in my version, at least it makes sense and will fit perfectly to what's going on. And it ties up a lot of loose ends. It sets up concepts like the Man in Black and Jacob's Cabin. Makes it clear that Ben is working with the Man in Black, which is something I don't think the whole Man in Black Jacob thing. When you look at the show, the actual show that aired in retrospect, is very muddied and it doesn't make any freaking sense. So that's one of the things I wanted to fix, and I think this episode is setting up nicely for the direction I want to go, while at the same time looking back and connecting it to the previous season. So I personally think this is exactly the kind of episode the show should have had. Anyway, we'll move over to my episode 9, which is The Shape of Things to Come, a Ben flash forward. So Ben's flash forwards are the same, where it starts with him landing in Tanzania and continuing with him recruiting Saeed in Iraq by convincing Saeed that Woodmore killed his wife. And it ends with Ben confronting Woodmore and saying, "I'm going to kill your daughter." All that the same. The island storyline is quite different. So the island storyline begins with Hurley freaking out, saying that he can't find Libby. Mr. Echo says that he saw her talking to Ben last. So he, Sawyer, Locke, and Hurley go to confront Ben, and he is, as usual, his cryptic self, but eventually reveals that Libby, Alex, and Rousseau ran off to be with the others. When Hurley asks why, why would Libby leave, Ben only says because he told him it'd be safe there. Hurley tries to beat the shit out of him, but Sawyer and Echo hold him back. We then see Kimi and the mercenaries drag Libby and Alex to the fence perimeter and tell Alex to disable it. Then we go back to the house where we see the phone ring and Locke answers it, and it says code 37 blue or whatever it was. And Locke asks what the hell that means, and his eyes, he asks Ben what the hell that means, and his eyes go big, and he answers that they're here. So he tells them that one of his people triggered the alarm because the mercenaries are here and they need to hunker down and get ready. Sawyer and Mr. Echo go to gather the rest of the people to Locke's house and bunker down, while Ben and Locke get the house ready to bunker down in, while Hurley just freaks out. So this is another thing I'm correcting, because I thought it was dumb how this really irritated me, how Locke was willing to just let everyone else die, and in fact wouldn't let Sawyer back in the house, and it was just like, don't leave, we're just going to screw them, they're all going to get killed, we don't care. Like, that spoke very poorly of Locke, and I think it was out of character for him, so it's not happening in my version. So Echo returns with Fergert and Rose and Bernard, who were actually looking after Aaron. So Rose is carrying Aaron. Locke asks where Claire is. Rose said that they were looking after Aaron while she was sleeping. We then see Sawyer going towards Claire's house, and he encounters Richard, Lucy, and Paul, and screams at them to get to Locke's house, but they're all killed. So, yeah, I mean, I am killing off the 3 extras that were with Locke, but I'm still not going as killed crazy as the show did, because I think the actual show they were implied it was like 10 to 15 extras that all got killed off, even though we only saw 3 extras on screen and nobody cared about them. Where in my version it's just 3 people, and they will care about them. So Sawyer then runs towards Claire's house while the mercenaries shoot at him, but then they shoot Claire's house with a rocket launcher and they destroy it. Sawyer goes to the rubble, but he can't find Claire, so he assumes that she's dead. Sawyer then runs back to Ben's house, and Echo throws a chair through the window so Sawyer can jump in. Rose asks about Claire and the other 3 people, but Sawyer shakes his head solemnly, indicating that they're all dead. The rest of the episode goes the same, with Miles showing up with the walkie, and Ben, gets it. Ben gets it, and Kimi is standing outside demanding his surrender. But when Ben says no, one of the men brings out Libby, and Kimi then yells at everyone in the house that if they don't give up Ben, they'll kill her. Hurley and Sawyer think that they should do that, but Ben says that if they do, they'll just kill everyone there, and Locke and Echo concur, so they refused to let them give Ben up. Libby shouts to Hurley, saying that she's sorry. Hurley goes to the window, saying that it's okay. Kimi gives a final warning, and Libby tells Hurley that she's pregnant, and Hurley screams at Locke to give up Ben, but Kimi then kills Libby. Hurley freaks out. He screams, he cries, but Echo holds him down, kind of hugging him at the same time. Kimi then talks to Ben on the walkie, saying he just proved his resolve, so now he's going to kill someone he cares about unless he gives himself up. Ben says all of his people are willing to die, then Kimi brings out Alex, and well, you know where it goes from here. Pretty much the same as it did in the show, except Ben calling the smoke monster makes a bit more sense because it's already been established that it agreed to protect him, and we saw how he summoned it before. Although there's going to be no talk about changing the rules in my version, so when they're all safely away from the mercenaries, Sawyer talks about going back to camp, and some people agree, except Ben and Locke say that they need to find Jacob. Hurley also refuses to go back to base camp because he wants nothing to do with the freighter people after what they did to Libby. Miles elects to stay with Ben as he's his golden ticket, and Fergard also chooses to stick with Locke because he feels more safe with him. But Sawyer, Echo, Bernard, and Rose, who's still carrying Aaron, go towards Jack's camp. So you might think, wow, I'm heartless. I mean, Alex's death was shocking and sad enough. Now I'm actually throwing Libby and saying that she's pregnant. I'm actually pulling like a red wedding. Yeah, it does fit into what I want to do is part of the reason, but it definitely does make it a hell of a lot more shocking and sad. So, well, you may think that maybe Libby's death detracts from Alex's death, so now you're just not thinking of Alex, thinking of Libby. But I'm kind of, because they grouped Libby and Ana Lucia's death together in the show, I'm kind of postponing that and grouping Libby and Alex's death together. I have my reasons. Anyway, get into the next episode, which is episode 10, Buried Secrets. This is a Freighter Folk flashback. So another episode I'm kind of inventing. So, the flashbacks switch between Faraday, Charlotte, and Miles. In Faraday's flashback, we see him meet and fall in love with his lab assistant, Teresa, and then we see that she really wants to help him advance his time travel research, and then we see her help him run a crew, or not, we don't see her, but she talks about how she's going to help him run a crucial experiment that's going to prove that time travel exists and make him famous. We then jump forward a couple of years where Faraday's mind is crippled, presumably from the experiment that went awry, and then Widmore comes to see him and check up on him, calling him a friend of the family. So this kind of bringing some stuff from season 5 forward a bit that kind of explains why people hint that Faraday's kind of not right. Anyway, Miles' flashbacks are a truncated version of Some Like It Hoth, although it doesn't have the storyline with Hank from Breaking Bad, but it just starts when he was a kid, when he discovered his abilities, and then goes to when he was a teenager and his mother is on her deathbed and says that his father's body is someplace he can never go. And then it goes up to Naomi approaching him for the job, and that's it. We don't get the whole thing about the fish taco and the dudes from season 5 putting him in the van, but we get the part where Naomi recruits him for the job. So Charlotte's flashbacks show her going to college, to a university for funding, as she thinks that she can discover a legendary island that she thinks is mentioned in many cultures' mythology, and she believes this mysterious Dharma initiative found this place in the 70s and used it for scientific experiments. We then later get a scene with her mother, as she's been rejected for funding yet again. So it's implied that she's completely, repeatedly being rejected. But Charlotte insists that this place is real, but her mother rejects the notion, but accidentally lets slip that she knows something about the Dharma Initiative. But when Charlotte presses it further, she just walks away. We then, later, we see her approached by Matthew Abaddon that tells her that the place she is looking for is real and that he can take her there as long as she helps in a job that he has to retrieve Ben Linus. So that explains why she was recruited. The episode is mostly flashbacks, but we do get some on-island storyline as well. In Jack's camp, we get the thing with the freighter doctor washing up on shore, and then them doing the Morse code with the freighter, and Steve knows Morse code, and he calls Daniel out for lying. Jack then yells at Faraday, asking if they were ever going to rescue them, and Daniel Faraday says no, but Charlotte chimes in, saying that they were hired as scientists to study the island. They weren't even told that there were survivors there, and they were never told that their group wouldn't be rescued, but their rescue is actually incidental. She says that this place is special and that she thinks she knows Jack knows this, but Jack scoffs and leaves. We also get some scenes on the freighter where the captain tries to get Michael to help fix the engines, but Michael refuses. So Saeed goes to the captain and says that he can get Michael to do it because that was part of his former profession, implying torture. And the captain gives him the go-ahead. Saeed then goes to torture Michael, but Desmond is against this and goes with him, but Saeed explains that Michael killed the woman that he loved. If you don't recall my version, Ana Lucia and Saeed were a thing. Not Ana Lucia and Shannon. not Saeed and Shannon. I changed that. It's Saeed and Ana Lucia. So anyway, Saeed threatens and starts to torture Michael. But Michael starts to spill about, being suicidal and how much he wanted to die for what he did to Ana Lucia, but he wanted to save everyone else first. He then talks about what he saw with Kimi and his men and saying that he's 100% certain that Kimi and the mercenaries are going to kill everyone. Saeed agrees and kind of relates with him on regretting his past, but then he convinces him that Kimi and his men aren't here and that the freighter being disabled helps no one. And that basically Michael's just letting himself be a pawn of Ben and letting himself be manipulated by Ben. Irony, irony, irony. And if he helps fix the engine, that Saeed promises to stop Kimi from killing everyone. He also promises to give Michael a quick death. He's like, I promise you, if you want a quick death, I will give you one. So Michael agrees, and he starts to help fix the engine. So we also get some scenes with Ben, Locke, Miles, Hurley, and Fergert traveling, where Hurley asks where they're going, and Locke says to a cabin, to which Miles questions. But once they're at the cabin, the circle of ash is gone. All the symbols on the door are gone, and it looks like just a normal cabin. They go inside, and nothing is there. Nothing happens. Locke is upset, saying, I don't understand. He asks Ben, but Ben is just as puzzled. And then Fergert says, oh, gee, that was fun. And then they leave. Cool. So then we'll get into my episode 11, which is Cabin Fever, a Locke flashback. So Locke's flashbacks are the same that start with his birth and Richard Alpert being there and Richard visiting him as a kid and offering him a science fair when he was a teenager, which he rejects, and then him getting a visit from Matthew Abaddon when he was in rehab for his, being paralyzed. And then the freighter storyline in this episode is pretty much exactly the same, with Kimi coming back and trying and failing to kill Michael, and the captain gives Saeed the Zodiac to go to the island, but Desmond stays on board, and then Kimi kills the doctor when Lapidus refuses to fly, and the captain tries to intercede, but Kimi kills him. And we also get to see a scene where Lapidus drops the walkie over Jack's camp, where he flies the helicopter over, and they take the walkie, the satellite phone, and they hear that they're going to the Orchid. And Jack and Kate elect to go after them, but Faraday insists on going as well, as the Orchid is bad and he needs to intercede. And Sun and Jen also want to go because Jen wants to make sure that Sun is the first one on the helicopter. But Charlotte actually elects to stay behind, so she and Faraday say their farewells and part ways. Locke's storyline is different. in this episode. It starts with them like sleeping after setting up camp, and Locke has a dream where he sees Jacob. And Jacob says, I told you to help me. And Locke is like, well, I don't know how. Then you see that they're talking in this bamboo field, the same one that Jack woke up on in the pilot episode, and they walk over to the stream. Jacob bends down and says, you must come here and bring me this water, but don't drink it. Locke asks why not, and Jacob says, well, because you're not ready. Then Locke wakes up and says he knows where to go, and Ben is just like, oh, I used to have dreams. So then they travel to the bamboo field, and Ben asks why they're going back to his camp, but Locke says that's not where they're going. So on the way, Ben acts all resentful, has his daughter just died, and he talks about destiny being a fickle bitch. He then realizes that the island is punishing him for being in league with the Man in Black, although he doesn't say as much. But Hurley doesn't want to hear any of this, as he's lost his loved one as well, and it's all Ben's fault because they were trying to kill him. Once they get to the stream, Locke fills up a water bottle, and Hurley bends down to drink some of the water, but Locke tells him not to. Hurley asks why, and Locke answers because he's not ready. Foreshadow. Locke asks Ben if this place is special, but Ben honestly doesn't seem to know anything about it. He says he's never been here before. They then go back to the cabin at night, and Locke splashes the water all over the door, and the symbols magically appear, as does the circle of ash. And Hurley's like, whoa. A light goes on in the cabin, and the door opens, inviting them in. So Ben tells Locke that he's not going in because the island chooses Locke, definitely not him. And then Miles is just like, don't look at me. And Fergard shakes his head, and Hurley says, yeah, I'm cool with you going in alone too. So Locke goes in, and he sees Jacob, who says, thank you. And you get the same line about where Locke says, do you know why I'm here? And Jacob says, yeah, do you? And Locke answers, yeah, I'm here because I'm meant to be here. And Jacob says, that's absolutely right. Then Claire appears, sitting in the chair next to Jacob, and Locke's like, what? We thought you were dead. And Claire says, well, no, I'm fine, John. I'm with him, and points to Jacob. And Jacob says, it's best not to tell anyone that she's here. When Locke protests, Jacob says that we don't have time for this. This isn't what he came here for. So Locke asks the important question, how do I save the island? And Jacob smiles. And then the episode ends after Locke returns to the group to, Ben, Ben, Miles, Hurley, and Fergard. And the episode ends with a big reveal that Locke is going to, dun, 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 move the island. So, if you haven't noticed, I'm leaving out the whole Christian Shepherd thing, because the whole Christian Shepherd thing doesn't really make sense. It doesn't add up. It's really confusing, because they're implying that Christian Shepherd later on is the Man in Black. But why is the Man in Black helping Locke? Why is the Man in Black simply not trying to kill him? Because as we learn later on that that's his motivations. I mean, you can get into all these rabbit hole theories about him trying to set things up perfectly, but it gets a bit too convoluted in my opinion. So I'm leaving all that shit out. It does change the dynamic that Claire is with Jacob and not the Man in Black, but I did that on purpose for what I want to set up with Claire, which I'll get into later. And yeah, so Christian Shepherd's not in this season at all, pretty much. Gotten rid of because it doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, we'll get into my episode 11, which is the Oceanic Six. So this is a flash forward of the Oceanic Six. So this episode takes place entirely in flash forward. So it's another one of those episodes similar to the other 48 Days where it's not flashing back and forth. It just sticks with the one storyline in chronological order and goes forward. But this one focusing on the Oceanic Six. So it starts the same way that There's No Place Like Home Part 1 does, where the Oceanic Six arrive in Honolulu and they're being reunited with their families, and then they have the press conference. The only difference in my version is, of course, in my version they weren't found on his island off of Indonesia, as in my version. The fake plane was found in the Tonga Trench, so they were claimed to be on a remote island of Tonga, as Tonga has 70 islands, only 39 of which are inhabited, so they claim to have been on one of these uninhabited remote islands that nobody goes to. And when they come ashore on the raft, it was to one of the remote inhabited islands of Tonga, where it takes like a month to get there, and you have to travel by boat. And they tell tourists not to go to these islands because the natives are not really used to outsiders. So that's the island that they showed up on to get rescued. Of course, when they showed up there and find out that they don't take a month to get them. They send a helicopter right away to get them immediately. The rest of the flash forwards from There's No Place Like Home Part 1 play out exactly the same, with, Sun taking over her company and Hurley's party and freaking out over the car, and all that stays exactly the same. But then we actually move past that and we see Nadia's death, where she's crossing the road and the car hits her. But Jacob's not there. In my version, Jacob isn't there, and I'm doing this on purpose too. We then get a scene of like Sun talking to Jack on the phone, yelling at him and refusing to talk to him because she's still upset about what happened. We get most of the flash forwards from Something Nice Back Home, because I'm skipping over that episode. The whole appendicitis storyline was dumb, so I'm skipping over that. But the flash forwards are still necessary because it shows how Jack became what he was and through the looking glass. So we get the flash forwards here. This kind of intercut with some of the Saeed and Sun flash forwards, which I'll get to shortly. But anyway, we get the same flash forwards with Jack and the Kate, and they're raising Aaron together, and they're all happy, and Jack proposes, but then their relationship starts to fall apart. Except in my version, I'm going to clearly imply that these scenes are very spread out, so that's why I'll intercut them with the other flash forwards to show that this takes place like a year later, because in the actual episode, I think Jack goes crazy a little too quickly, and I didn't quite believe it, but here it's going to happen a lot more gradually. We're going to show that a lot more time has passed while he's slowly going into madness. And we get the same scene with him visiting Hurley in the mental hospital when Hurley talks about seeing Charlie and that he's going to get a visitor. And, Jack sees Christian Shepherd, which is my only use of Christian Shepherd, except in my version it's not implied as a smoke monster because that makes no fucking sense. It's just him seeing his dad and other freaky shit. Also, I want to add freaky shit that adds to why Jack's starting to go crazy, and he sees nightmares of Sawyer and Juliet yelling at him, asking them why they left him behind, and so it's implied he's not sleeping, so he starts popping pills, so you get the sense that he's going mad a bit more. And eventually, we get to see the falling out with Kate, where he yells at her, "You're not even related to him," and Kate doesn't want to talk to him anymore. Meanwhile, we also get some Saeed killing more people for Ben until someone dies, and with their dying breath, they say that Ben's manipulating him, which gives Saeed a pause. So he goes to Ben, and he denies it. So the next person Saeed goes to kill, he lets him talk more. And he shows him pictures of the man that killed Nadia with Ben talking, and he claims that this man worked for Ben and killed Nadia for Ben in order to let Ben manipulate Saeed into killing his enemies. Saeed is outraged. He lets this person live, and then he goes to Ben, punches him in the face, throws him around. Ben insists that they're playing him, that he's the one trying to manipulate Saeed to turn against Ben. So Saeed doesn't know who to believe. So he simply says he quits, and if he ever sees him again, that he'll kill him. So the episode ends. It's the whole way that was done in the show where Ben's just like, "Oh, you killed everyone, that's it," and it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. They never explain the killing, and it doesn't make sense why Saeed was so upset with Ben where there was really no big falling out. In my version, there's a big falling out, and it makes it clear, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. So the episode ends with getting caught up to Through the Looking Glass, where we see from Kate's perspective, where Jack calls her and asks her not to hang up, and that he wants to visit. So we see Kate like getting ready to hang up and crying and saying, "Why do you keep calling me? What do you want?" And then when Kate, Jack has to visit, she's like, "Fine." So then we get the tail end of Through the Looking Glass flash forward, where Jack yells, "We have to go back!" And then the episode ends. Cool. So then, all caught up in the flash forward. To me, I think this is a better idea because it makes it clear that we're going through the whole gambit of when the first Oceanic Six first arrived, going right up and getting right caught up to Through the Looking Glass. So, and then we get the season finale, final episode of the season, There's No Place Like Home. The Oceanic Six flash forward. So the episode begins just like There's No Place Like Home Part 2 does, where the previously on ends with the scene of Jack saying, "We have to go back," and the episode begins immediately after, where Kate slams in reverse and yells at Jack. And then the rest of the flash forwards is pretty much exactly the same as There's No Place Like Home Part 2, that continue after Through the Looking Glass scenes and end with the reveal that Locke was in the coffin. So on Island, it begins with Kate and Jack running into Sawyer, Echo, Rose, Bernard, and Aaron. And when Kate sees Aaron, she asks about Claire, but Sawyer says that she didn't make it. Jack then asks if everyone died, but Mr. Echo tells him that Locke, Hurley, and Frogurt went with Ben and Miles, but the rest didn't make it out. Jack says that he's going after the helicopter and the rest should just return to base camp, but Jen refuses, saying that he and Son are going with them. And Sawyer says that he's going too, as does Faraday, who's still on his mission. But Mr. Echo and Kate agree to take Rose and Bernard and the baby back to beach. So on the beach, Saeed arrives with the Zodiac and explains that the people on the helicopter are hostile, and Juliet is upset because Jack and a whole bunch of people just went after the helicopter. But just then, Mr. Echo, Kate, Rose, and Bernard get back to the beach, and Saeed says that he's going after Jack, and Kate says that she's going with him. But so does Juliet. His son is pregnant, and she needs to get off the island, so she wants to make sure that she does. Mr. Echo says that while they do that, he can start ferrying people back to the freighter. Juliet says that Tracy is pregnant, so she gets to be one of the first people on the boat. And Kate hands Tracy Aaron and tells her to take Aaron as well. So Mr. Echo, Tracy, Steve, Aaron, and 4 background characters, let's say Susan, Jonathan, Jasper, and Esmeralda, get on the Zodiac to go to the boat. We don't get any scenes of Locke, Ben, Hurley, Miles, and Frogurt on the way to the Orchid. We just see them there, and Ben explains this is where Locke can move the island, but Kimi and his team are already there, waiting for them, so Ben gives himself up. Meanwhile, Juliet, Kate, and Saeed are surrounded and taken prisoner by Richard Alpert and the others, but this time Juliet tells Kate and Saeed to cooperate, and then they make a deal to help them rescue Ben, and then they can all go home. The guy then says hello to Kate and Saeed and says that they've never met, but he asks how Echo and Bernard are doing, and he said that he's sorry to hear about Libby and Ana Lucia. Kate's confused, but he says his name is Lars and that he was on Flight 815. Kate asks if he's with the others now, and he's just like, yeah. Then Jack, Sawyer, Faraday's son, and Jen catch up to the helicopter where Lapidus is handcuffed to it and trying to break free, and he says if they cut him loose, he'll fly them out of there. But then Lapidus mentions that Kimi and his men went to get Ben, and they're going to kill anyone with them, so Jack and Sawyer go to get Hurley and Frogurt, who are with Locke and Ben, while Jen, Son, and Faraday stay behind in order to help Lapidus. Jack goes to the Orchid to find Locke, Miles, Frogurt, and Hurley, and then Jack and Locke have their big throwdown about where Locke asks Jack not to leave, and says that when Jack refuses, then he says that he's going to have to lie. Jack and Sawyer then say that they're going back to the helicopter. The others then catch up to Kimi and his men, who are dragging Ben in handcuffs before they reach the helicopter. This doesn't happen at the helicopter like it does in the show, but before they reach it, the others catch up to them, and we get the same sort of epic fight where Saeed and Kimi throw down. Albert shoots him in the back, and they kill most of Kimi's men, and then the others offer to let them go. So Kate, Saeed, and Juliet arrive at the helicopter just as Jack, Sawyer, Miles, Hurley, and Frogurt arrive. Lapidus sadly informs them that there's not enough room for everyone. Faraday and Miles elect to stay, and so does Juliet, who says Sun needs to get on board first, so Sun boards. They also agree Hurley should probably, because he's grieving, so he boards, and Jack and Saeed are on board getting the helicopter ready when Kimi comes back and he attacks. Sawyer and Jen charge at Kimi, but one of Kimi's men, who also survived the others, comes up with a rocket launcher, so Lapidus takes off with the helicopter with everyone who's already just happens to be on board, which is Jack, Saeed, Sun, Kate, and Hurley. Juliet, Faraday, Miles, and Frogurt take cover. However, while the helicopter is flying away, they can see Kimi. Apparently, he shoots and kills Jen. So Sun screams at them to turn back, but Lapidus says that they can't, as the rocket launcher fires at them and misses the helicopter but flies right past it. So Lapidus is like, no way can I turn back, so they fly off. Sawyer kills the guy with the rocket launcher and then fires at Kimi, who simply makes a run back to the Orchid. So Juliet and Faraday tend to Jen immediately, trying to save his life, while Sawyer yells for help to go after Kimi, so Miles comes and joins Sawyer as they run after Kimi. But Frogurt is just like, I'm just going to hang here. So on the helicopter, Sun is still screaming to go back, but Lapidus says they can't because he doesn't have enough fuel. He needs to get the helicopter to the freighter so they can refuel, because they're leaking. One of the shots hit the fuel tank and it's leaking. Jack tells Sun that he's gone and that they'll come back for the body once they refuel. Meanwhile, Ben and Locke get to the bottom of the Orchid station, where Locke watches the video about time-traveling bunnies, and Ben prepares to do exactly what the video says not to do when they notice that someone is using the elevator. Sawyer and Miles arrive at the Orchid too late, as they can tell that Kimi already went down. Meanwhile, on the freighter, we get the same scenes of Michael discovering the bomb and Desmond trying to disarm it while Michael freezes the battery. And we get the scene where Kimi arrives at the bottom of the Orchid and tells them about the dead man's switch to the bomb on the boat, but Ben just kills Kimi anyway. So Desmond and Michael see the bomb's light turn red, so Desmond goes to tell everyone to evacuate when he sees the helicopter coming. And just then, they also see Mr. Echo approaches with the Zodiac at the same time. So Desmond starts screaming at the helicopter to turn around, but of course they don't, and it lands just as Echo and the others come on board. Desmond screams at both of them that they need to leave. So Desmond helps patch up the helicopter. Mr. Echo recognizes that there's not enough room for everyone on the helicopter, so he says he'll take everyone back on the Zodiac, but he can also take men from the freighter who want to evacuate. So Tracy hands Kate Aaron back, saying that he'll be safer on the helicopter. So then she, Steve, Echo, and the 4 extras get back on the Zodiac along with 4 people from the freighter, and the rest of the people from the freighter, 10 in total, get on another Zodiac, and they take off to leave towards the island. And then the helicopter lifts off with Desmond and Aaron being new additions on board. And then we see Michael run out of gas, and Jacob appears to Michael and says, "You can go now," and the freighter explodes. Yeah, Jacob does, not the Man in Black, and not Christian Shepherd, because that makes no fucking sense. Anyway, Desmond then tells them that Michael was the one who saved their lives by sacrificing his, and Saeed confirms that Michael was there, and so they all take note that Michael kind of redeemed himself. Back on the island, Juliet says that she stabilized Jen for now, but she needs equipment, so they need to move him to the Orchid. So she yells at Ferger to help her and Faraday move Jen. He's hesitant at first, but he does it. Back on the beach, we see Charlotte go up to Shannon, who's drinking alone on the beach. Charlotte asks her why she's celebrating, and Shannon replies that she's not celebrating and points to the ocean where she can see the freighter on fire. Charlotte asks if that's their boat, and Shannon says it was. We then see Juliet, Faraday, and Fergus arrive at the Orchid carrying Jen, and Sawyer and Miles help them as soon as they get there. But then Ben gives his farewell speech to Locke, has whoever moves the island can't come back, and then he goes to the frozen donkey wheel. So Locke takes the elevator up and helps Juliet tend to Jen. And then Ben turns the frozen donkey wheel and moves the island. So we see Locke, Sawyer, Faraday, Miles, Juliet, Jen, and Fergus at the Orchid as a bright light overcomes them. And we see Shannon and Charlotte on the beach as the light overcomes them. We see Mr. Echo, Steve, and Tracy on the Zodiac as the light overcomes them. Then the helicopter, we see the light overcome them, and then the island disappears. So here on out pretty much goes exactly the same as the show did. They can't find the island, so they crash in the water and they get into a life raft. Desmond's life is endangered, but he's saved. Then Penny shows up with her boat to save Desmond, to save them all, and then Desmond and Penny are reunited, and she says that she tracked him with his phone call. Jack tells them that they need to lie. And then we jump to a week later where Penny takes them to Tonga, where they can come ashore and be rescued, and they can keep to their story in the Oceanic Six part where they part with Lupita's, Desmond, and Penny. And then it ends with the Oceanic Six arriving on shore to be rescued in order to catch up with the beginning of the last episode. Flash forwards, and then we get the flash forward where it's revealed that Locke is in the coffin. Now, I think I need to explain myself because I did a lot of shuffling of the characters that at the time some of you may think it was unnecessary, but hopefully now you know what I'm getting at and why I did it. Because in my season 5, they're not going to say the whole island time traveled, and yet only seemed certain people that time traveled. Like Locke was with the others and he just disappeared, but the others for some reason stayed behind, and none of them time traveled, and Claire for some reason didn't try and travel, but other people up back at the camp time traveled, and this was always a huge flaw to me. This felt really stupid, and I really didn't like it. And the whole, excuse, the blanket excuse the writers always use, "Oh, the island did it," is a dumb excuse. So I wanted to totally do away with that. Now, I still wanted to do time travel, and I still only wanted to have certain people time travel, but I didn't want to come up with this lame "the island did it" excuse. So all the people I wanted to time travel were at the Orchid. Therefore, I can say people who were at the Orchid, aka close to the blast radius, they're the ones that got unstuck in time. But not everyone, just certain people on the island for no goddamn reason whatsoever. So that makes a hell of a lot more sense to me. That's why, Sawyer, Locke, and Juliet were unstuck in time, because they were all at the Orchid station during the event. But it was kind of a logistical nightmare trying to figure this out. So I wanted Locke, Sawyer, Juliet, Miles, Faraday, Jen, and Fergus to time travel, which was hard with Jen in particular, as it meant I had to sacrifice the whole freighter death because Jen had to be at the Orchid station. So that's why I changed the whole order of events of his death. So the freighter explosion in my version was not as exciting as the show's version, but I think that's a sacrifice I had to make. But on the bright side, I actually eliminated another nonsensical thing from the show, which is how Jin survived the explosion. And that was a very poor excuse that, oh, the blast just threw him in the water and he somehow floated all the way back to shore. It's beyond ridiculous. So that ridiculous part of it is gone, but I kept the aspect of Sun thinking that he was dead. So also I didn't want Charlotte to time travel, which is why she was on the beach and not with everyone else. And I'm not going to needlessly kill off all the socks or supporting characters like the show did. I think that's another thing I had a really huge issue with. I have something better in mind for them. So all the characters who stayed back at the beach, so they will be less important and they will feature less in the next 2 seasons of my version, but they will factor in and I will explain what happened to them. So that does mean everyone who stayed on the beach, everyone in the Zodiac, including like Echo and all of them, they remain on the island in present times along with Claire and the others. So now you may ask why Echo and the Zodiac stayed with the island while the helicopter didn't, because the helicopter can move faster than the Zodiac. But my response to that is the same response that the show gave as to why Jen stayed with the island and not the helicopter, because if you think of the perimeter of the island what traveled with the island as a bubble, meaning is if you're closer in length wise, but you're still too far up height wise, then you'd miss the bubble. And that's always made sense to me. So I'm pretty much doing the exact same thing because I think that makes sense, because Echo, whatever, or sea level, so they're in the bubble where the helicopter is too high, so it's outside of the bubble. So I'm keeping with that because I think that makes sense to me. Anyway, that is it. That is it for my How I Would Write Lost season part 4, where I cover season 4. So I will be back in about a couple months. No, not a couple, month and a half, let's say, for my How I Would Write Lost season 5, where I can continue this and then we diverge even more when we get to season 5. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. You should check out my Lost reviews. I will start my coverage of season 5 in about 2 weeks, where I cover part 1 of season 5. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.